Okay, so I'm going to just show you how to use the Asset Warp tool. Okay, so if I just scrub the needle here, you can see I've used the Asset Warp tool to animate this character's hair to make it look like it's blowing in the breeze. Okay, it can be really useful for hair blowing in the wind, clothing moving as people move or as the wind blows it, things like flames, anything like that. Okay, so this is what we're going to end up with. Now I just wanted to show you how to import assets from Illustrator, because I created this asset in Illustrator, this character. So I've created it in here. I've put anything that I want to animate on its own layer here, so you can see I've got the hair on its own layer here and then everything else on the other layer. Alright, so just save that as an Illustrator file. Go back to animate. Okay, so create a new movie. So let me just close that. So file and new, so the usual process which we're all familiar with now, I think. Just select character animation, make sure it's set to standard dimensions, frame rate to 10, platform type action script 3. Okay, so we've got our new empty movie. File, import to stage, select our animate file and open. Now you'll see here we've got the imports dialog box. Now Illustrator creates a series of paths when you draw anything, these sub layers, so don't worry about these, just compress the two main layers so you can just see the two main layers that replicate what we did in Illustrator. So we've got the layer with the hair on and the layer with the character on. Click on select all layers to make sure it imports both. Go to convert layers to, just make sure you select animate layers so it converts these two into two animate layers, and then import, and you'll see it brings them in as they were in Illustrator. Okay. Okay, remember to lock, so if you lock the layer with the character on, because we're not concerned with that, so if we just name our layers, get into good habits, so the layer with the main character on, and then the layer with the hair on, so we're clear which is which. Lock the layer with the character on, click on the layer with the hair on, and that will select everything on that layer. Okay, if you hold down control and mouse wheel and zoom in now on the bit that we're concerned with, okay, and then we're going to turn this into a symbol. So if we go to modify, convert to symbol, select graphic is fine, call it hair so it matches the name of the layer, and OK it. Okay, and that will turn that into a symbol. Okay, and then to use the Asset Warp tool, so we're going to double click on that symbol now, and if you look in the top left here, it tells us we're inside the symbol because we can now see hair and the graphic symbol here. Alright, so we're inside the hair symbol. So if you now select the Asset Warp tool, okay, I'm just going to click off this to deselect it now. I'm going to select the Asset Warp tool. Alright, remember we're inside the hair symbol. Click in the centre of that object. Now you click once and it selects the whole thing, then you click again and it turns it into a mesh. Okay, so you can see this kind of polygon mesh appears. Okay, now if you click in the centre of the object initially to create the mesh, then if I zoom in a bit further, okay, I can then click and create points. So these are points that I want to manipulate. So in this case I'm going to click and create them at the end of each strand of hair, because I want to move the separate strands so they look like they're blowing in the wind. Okay, you just take a bit of time to create those. Okay, so we've created that, so we want to start animating this now. I'm just going to animate it over 3 frames. So if I click here on frame 2, press F6, and then on this second F6 frame, again just with the warp tool, just click on the object to select it, and then I can mouse over any of these points still with the warp tool selected, and you see we get this little arrow appears, which enables me to then, instead of creating them, I can now manipulate what I've created. So I can just shift those. So again, with animation it's a question of moving and scrubbing the needle to see how the movement looks. experimentation until you're happy with it and it looks convincing. Okay, so if I move those, if I scrub, so we've got our first bit of animation there. I could put in a, say if I go to frame 4, click on frame 4, press F6 and put in a third keyframe. Again, click on it and manipulate them further. Okay, what I could also do is I could apply a tween to this, so I could put a tween between these two keyframes here because there's an ordinary frame in between them. So if I just shift click to select that block in between the two keyframes, right click and classic tween, and that'll tween that last bit just to smooth the movement a bit. Okay, so if I go back to scene 1 now, so on the main timeline you'll see here that we've only got one frame, so obviously we need to extend that. So say we want our animation to last for 30 frames. If I shift click at frame 30, press F5 to extend to there, and then you'll see if I scrub the needle that animation that we created inside the symbol will now play on a loop. Okay, across 30 frames. Okay, so that is how you use the Asset Warp tool. Just want to add a little explanation to this. You'll notice that when I turn this into a warp asset, that the lines of hair, hang on, let me go inside there. These hairlines here disappeared. Well, they didn't disappear. Basically, the fill itself was brought to the front and kind of obscured them. So I think if I'd wanted to keep these lines of hair, I would have needed to have put them on a separate layer. Now I can still do that. So I can select them here and cut them out. I can go back to scene 1. I can create another layer and I can paste them on it, and then I can overlay them over the hair here. So just to kind of explain why that was obscured, so what the Asset Warp tool does is it applies the effect to a fill. Okay, so if you've got any lines overlaying the fill like this, then you need to put them on a separate layer and overlay them.